Jake Morrison pressed his face against the small window of the transport shuttle and stared at the massive structure floating in space before him. Nexus Prime stretched across the darkness like a metal city, its towers and docking bays glowing with thousands of lights. The space station was bigger than anything he had ever seen, bigger than the entire town he grew up in back in Ohio. The shuttle pilot, a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms, glanced back at him and made a sound that might have been laughter. Jake could not understand the alien language, but he got the feeling the pilot was not impressed with Earth's first military exchange candidate. The other passengers on the shuttle were all aliens too, and they had been staring at Jake since he boarded. Some whispered to each other while pointing at him with various appendages. Jake tried to ignore them and focused on the view outside. This was his chance to prove that humans belonged in the Galactic Defense Coalition. Earth had been trying to join for 30 years, and finally the aliens had agreed to let one human participate in their military training program. If Jake succeeded, more humans would follow. If he failed, Earth might wait another 30 years for another chance. The shuttle docked with a soft thud, and Jake grabbed his single bag of belongings. He had packed light because the instructions said everything else would be provided. The other passengers rushed past him as soon as the doors opened, eager to get away from the strange human. Jake followed them into a corridor that seemed to stretch forever in both directions. The station was full of aliens. Jake had seen pictures and videos during his briefings, but seeing them in person was different. Tall creatures with gray skin, and too many joints walked alongside short furry beings that moved in groups. Some aliens floated instead of walking, while others had so many legs that Jake lost count. The air smelled strange, like metal and something he could not identify. A voice boomed across the docking area in English. "Morrison, Jake Morrison, report to Processing Station 3 immediately." Jake looked around until he found a sign with the number 3 and an arrow. He walked in that direction, trying not to bump into any of the aliens hurrying past him. Processing Station 3 turned out to be a small office with a desk and 2 chairs. Behind the desk sat a creature that looked almost human except for the green skin and the fact that it had no hair anywhere on its head. The alien looked up from a screen and studied Jake with large yellow eyes. "You are the human," the alien said in perfect English. "I am Administrator Kell. I handle all new arrivals to Nexus Prime." The alien's voice was flat and showed no emotion. "You will be assigned to Training Battalion 7 under Commander Vexstar. Do you have questions?" Jake had dozens of questions, but he sensed that Administrator Kell was not the type to appreciate curiosity. "No, sir," he replied. "Good. Here is your identification badge, your schedule, and a map of the station. Do not lose any of these items. Your quarters are in Section C, Level 5. Your first training session begins tomorrow at 0800 station time. Do not be late." The alien handed Jake a small device and 3 sheets of paper. "Next." Jake realized he was being dismissed. He stood up and headed for the door, but Administrator Kell called after him. "Human Morrison, the other species have been training together for generations. They know each other and they know what to expect. You are unknown. Prove that you belong here, or you will be sent home in disgrace." The walk to his quarters took longer than expected. The station was huge and the map was confusing. Jake got lost twice and had to ask for directions from aliens who either ignored him or pointed without speaking. When he finally found Section C, Level 5, he discovered that his room was at the very end of a long hallway. The quarters were small but clean. A bed, a desk, a closet, and a small bathroom. On the desk was a package containing uniforms and training gear. Jake tried on one of the uniforms and found that it fit reasonably well, though it was clearly designed for someone with different proportions. The material felt strange against his skin dot as Jake unpacked his few belongings. He heard voices in the hallway outside his room. The voices were speaking in English, which surprised him. He opened his door and saw 2 humans walking toward him. The woman was tall with short black hair, and the man was older with gray at his temples. "You must be Jake Morrison," the woman said, extending her hand. I'm Lisa Grant from the Diplomatic Corps, and this is Dr. Pete Collins from the Science Division. We heard Earth's military candidate had arrived. Jake shook both their hands, relieved to meet other humans. How long have you been here? He asked. 2 years for me, Lisa replied. Pete has been here for 6 months. We're the only humans on the station besides you. Dr. Collins looked serious. We need to talk to you about what you're getting into. The aliens aren't exactly welcoming to humans. They think we're primitive and weak. Most of them believe we're only accepted into the coalition because Earth has resources they want, not because we have anything to contribute militarily. The training program you're entering has never had a human participant, Lisa added. The other recruits have been working together for months. They're all from species known for their physical abilities or combat skills. You're going to stand out, and not necessarily in a good way. Jake felt his confidence wavering. Back on Earth, he had been one of the strongest workers on his construction crew. He could lift heavy equipment and work long hours without getting tired, but these aliens were different. Some of them were twice his size, and others had natural weapons like claws or armored skin. What should I do? Jake asked. Work harder than everyone else, Dr. Collins said. Learn faster than everyone else. Show them that humans have something valuable to offer. You represent all of humanity now? If you succeed, more humans will get opportunities in the coalition. If you fail, we'll be waiting another generation for another chance, Lisa finished. No pressure. After Lisa and Dr. Collins left, Jake sat on his bed and stared at the training schedule. Tomorrow he would meet Commander Vexstar and the other recruits. He would begin the program that would determine not just his own future, but the future of human involvement in galactic affairs. Jake looked at himself in the small mirror above his desk. He saw a young man from Ohio who had worked construction since he graduated high school. He was strong for a human, but was that enough? The aliens expected him to fail. Maybe they were right, but Jake had not come this far to give up before he even started. He had been chosen from thousands of candidates because someone believed he could succeed. Tomorrow he would find out if that belief was justified. He set his alarm and tried to get some sleep, knowing that his real test would begin in just a few hours. Jake woke up to the sound of his alarm and immediately felt nervous. Today was his first day of training with the aliens, and he had no idea what to expect. He put on his uniform and checked himself in the mirror one more time before heading to the training facility. The corridors were busy with aliens moving in all directions. Jake followed his map to Training Hall 7 and found himself standing in front of massive doors that opened automatically as he approached. Inside was the largest room he had ever seen, with high ceilings and equipment scattered everywhere. The space could have held 3 football fields. At the center of the room stood the biggest creature Jake had ever encountered. The alien was at least 8 feet tall with thick gray skin that looked like armor. Its arms were as big around as tree trunks, and its face had features that reminded Jake of a cross between a rhinoceros and a gorilla. This had to be Commander Vexstar. Around the commander stood 12 other aliens, all younger, but still impressive in size and appearance. Jake recognized some of the species from his briefings. The gray-skinned giants were Krillians, known throughout the galaxy for their incredible strength. The smaller aliens with 4 arms and quick movements were Vectari, famous for their speed and agility. A few others had blue skin and large heads, which meant they were Zephyrians, respected for their intelligence and tactical abilities. Commander Vexstar noticed Jake approaching and turned to face him. The commander's eyes were small and dark, and they showed no warmth or welcome. "So you are the human," Vexstar said in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. "I expected someone bigger." The other recruits turned to look at Jake, and several of them made sounds that were clearly laughter. One young Krillian stepped forward and looked Jake up and down. "This is what Earth sends us? He looks like he would break if I touched him." "I am Thokmar," the young Krillian announced. "My family has served in the coalition military for generations. We have never seen anything so small in a training facility." The other aliens laughed again, and Jake felt his face getting red. Commander Vexstar held up one massive hand for silence. Enough talking, we begin with physical assessment. All recruits will demonstrate basic strength, speed, and endurance. Human, you will go first. Jake walked over to where the commander was pointing. There was a rack of weights that looked nothing like the equipment he was used to. The smallest weight on the rack was marked with alien symbols, but Jake could see numbers that meant it weighed about 50 pounds. The largest weight had to be close to 300 pounds. Lift the standard training weight, Commander Vexstar ordered, pointing to a weight in the middle of the rack. Jake picked it up and found it weighed about 120 pounds. He lifted it over his head without too much trouble, but he could see that the aliens were not impressed. Thokmar stepped up next and grabbed a weight that had to be at least 200 pounds. He lifted it easily with one hand while grinning. Jake? Perhaps the human should try the children's weights, he suggested. And the other recruits laughed again. The strength test continued with each alien lifting heavier weights than Jake could manage. Even the smallest Vectari recruit handled weights? That would have been difficult for Jake. By the time everyone was finished, Jake had clearly performed the worst of the group. Next came the speed test. The recruits had to run through an obstacle course that included jumping over barriers, crawling under nets, and climbing walls. Jake had always been a decent runner, but the aliens were something else entirely. The Vectari moved so fast they were almost a blur, while even the massive Krillians moved with surprising quickness. Jake did his best, but by the time he finished the course, all the other recruits were sitting and waiting for him. Some were talking quietly among themselves, and Jake caught words like slow and weak. Even though they were speaking in their own languages, the endurance test was even worse. The group had to hold their arms out straight while carrying weights for as long as possible. Jake's arms started shaking after 5 minutes, while some of the aliens looked like they could continue for hours. He was the first to drop his arms, and he heard more laughter from behind him. Commander Vexstar made notes on a tablet while shaking his head. Disappointing, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Perhaps humans are better suited for non-combat roles. The afternoon brought weapons training, and Jake hoped this would be better. The instructor was a Vectari named Slikther who moved so fast that Jake had trouble following what he was demonstrating. The standard coalition rifle was designed for aliens with longer arms and stronger hands than humans possessed. Jake could barely hold it steady, let alone aim it accurately. The weapon is too big for little pink hands, Thokmar commented, and several other recruits snickered. Jake tried to ignore them and focus on the lesson, but the rifle felt awkward and heavy in his grip when it came time for target practice. Jake's shots went wide of the mark more often than not. The Krillian recruits hit the center of their targets almost every time, while the Vectari moved so quickly that they could hit multiple targets in the time it took Jake to line up one shot. Maybe the human needs a smaller weapon, suggested another recruit, something more appropriate for his abilities. Instructor Slikther stopped the lesson and looked at Jake with 4 eyes that showed no patience. Fighting is not just about weapons. It is about understanding your enemy and reacting faster than they can think. This requires training that begins when you are very young. Humans do not start military preparation until they are adults, yes? Jake nodded, feeling more discouraged with each passing minute. On Earth, he had joined the military at 18 and had done well in training. But here, surrounded by aliens who had been preparing for combat since childhood, he felt completely out of place. The day ended with a simulation exercise where the recruits worked in teams to complete a mission. Jake was assigned to a team with Thokmar and 2 other Krillians. The mission involved infiltrating a mock enemy base and retrieving important data. Jake tried his best to contribute, but his teammates quickly decided he was more of a liability than an asset. They gave him simple tasks like watching for guards while they handled the important parts of the mission. Even then, Jake made mistakes that caused the team to fail their objective. Next time, the human stays at base, one of Thokmar's teammates suggested. He is not ready for real missions. After training ended, Jake walked slowly back to his quarters. In the corridors, he passed groups of alien recruits who pointed at him and whispered to each other. Word had clearly spread about the human's poor performance on his first day. When Jake reached his room, he sat on his bed and stared at his hands. Back on Earth, these hands had built houses and moved heavy equipment. Here, they could barely hold an alien rifle steady. He wondered if the other humans on the station had heard about his failures yet. He wondered if Commander Vexstar was already preparing a report recommending that the human exchange program be cancelled. Jake looked at the schedule for tomorrow's training and felt his stomach tighten. More weapons practice, more physical challenges, more opportunities to prove that humans did not belong in the Galactic Defense Coalition. He had one day of training behind him, and already he was starting to think that maybe the aliens were right about humans being too weak for military service. 3 weeks had passed since Jake started training, and nothing had improved. Every morning he woke up hoping things would be different, but every evening he returned to his quarters feeling worse than before. The other recruits had stopped laughing at him because they no longer found his failures amusing. Now they just ignored him completely. Commander Vexstar barely looked at Jake during training sessions anymore. The massive Krillian had clearly decided that the human was a waste of time and resources. Jake overheard him talking to other instructors about recommending that Earth's military exchange program be terminated immediately. During mealtimes in the station cafeteria, Jake sat alone while the alien recruits gathered in groups based on their species. They talked and joked with each other in their own languages, occasionally glancing over at Jake with expressions that ranged from pity to disgust. Even the station staff seemed to treat him differently, like he was some kind of failed experiment. Jake had tried everything he could think of to improve his performance. He stayed after training sessions to practice with the weapons, but the rifles and energy blades still felt wrong in his hands. He worked out in the gym during his free time, but he could not build strength fast enough to compete with aliens, who were naturally much stronger. He studied tactical manuals until his eyes hurt, but book knowledge did not help when he froze up during combat simulations. The worst part was the messages from Earth. Jake received regular communications from military leadership asking about his progress. He had stopped being honest in his replies because he did not want to disappoint the people who had believed in him. Instead, he sent short messages saying that training was challenging, but he was working hard to improve. On this particular morning, Commander Vexstar announced that the recruits would be visiting a special section of the station armory. Today you will see weapons that most coalition members never get to observe, the commander said. These are not training tools. They are artifacts of war created by the greatest weaponsmiths in galactic history. Jake followed the group through corridors he had never seen before. They passed through multiple security checkpoints where guards scanned their identification badges and checked them for unauthorized items. The security became more intense as they went deeper into the station, and Jake began to wonder what kind of weapons required this level of protection. Finally, they reached a massive vault door that took 3 different keys to open. Beyond the door was a room that looked more like a museum than an armory. Weapons were displayed in individual cases with lights that made them gleam like precious jewels. Some of the weapons were so strange that Jake could not even guess how they were supposed to be used. These weapons were created during the great wars that shaped our galaxy, Commander Vexstar explained as the group moved through the room. Each one represents the finest work of master craftsmen from different species and different eras. Some are thousands of years old, but they remain as deadly today as when they were first forged. The recruits moved from case to case, studying plasma cannons that could destroy starships and energy swords that could cut through any known material. Jake tried to pay attention to the commander's explanations, but he felt out of place even here. These weapons belonged to a universe where he did not fit. They stopped in front of a case that was larger than all the others. Inside was the most impressive weapon Jake had ever seen. It looked like a war hammer, but it was enormous. The handle was as long as Jake was tall, and the head of the hammer was bigger than his torso. Strange symbols covered every surface, and the metal seemed to glow with its own inner light. "This is the Titan Crusher," Commander Vexstar said, and his voice carried a reverence that Jake had never heard before. It was forged by the ancient Krillian weapon masters during the Void War over 500 years ago. The hammer is made from neutronium, one of the densest materials in the universe, and powered by a quantum energy core. Thokmar stepped closer to the case, his eyes wide with admiration. My great-grandfather told me stories about this weapon. It was used to end the siege of Kithara Station. A single blow from the Titan Crusher shattered the enemy's flagship. The weapon weighs nearly 300 kilograms, the commander continued. It requires tremendous strength just to lift and even greater skill to wield in combat. The quantum core responds to the wielder's bioelectric field, amplifying both the physical and energy-based attacks. Only the strongest Krillian warriors have ever been able to use it effectively. Jake stared at the weapon and felt something strange. Unlike all the other weapons in the armory, the Titan Crusher seemed to be calling to him. He could not explain the feeling, but it was as if the hammer was aware of his presence and was somehow reaching out to him. The last warrior to carry. The Titan Crusher in battle was General Morthuk, Commander Vexstar said. He wielded it during the final assault that ended the Void War. After his death, the weapon was placed here as a monument to Krillian military achievement. One of the younger Krillian recruits raised his hand. Commander, has anyone tried to lift the Titan Crusher recently? Vexstar smiled, which was a frightening expression on his massive face. Many have tried. Even with modern training and nutrition, few Krillians possess the strength required. The weapon remains too heavy for most warriors to handle effectively. Thokmar puffed up his chest with pride. My family has a tradition of strength that goes back generations. My father once lifted a starship engine block without mechanical assistance. Perhaps you would like to demonstrate your inherited strength, the commander suggested. And Jake could hear the challenge in his voice. The other recruits gathered around as technicians opened the weapon's case. The Titan Crusher rested on a special mounting system that held it at waist height. Even without touching it, Jake could feel energy radiating from the quantum core. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Thokmar stepped forward and placed both hands on the weapon's handle. His muscles bulged as he tried to lift the massive hammer. He managed to raise it a few centimeters off its mounting before the weight became too much. He set it back down, breathing heavily but trying to look casual about his failure. Respectable effort, Commander Vexstar said. The weapon is heavier than most recruits expect. Other alien recruits took turns attempting to lift the Titan Crusher. Some did better than Thokmar, managing to raise it higher before the weight defeated them. But none of them could actually lift the weapon clear of its mounting system. Each failure was met with encouraging comments from the commander, as if struggling with the legendary weapon was exactly what was expected. Finally, all the alien recruits had taken their turns. They stood around the weapon case, discussing the experience and comparing how much each of them had been able to lift. Jake hung back from the group. Assuming that his participation was neither expected nor desired, Thokmar noticed Jake standing apart from the others and grinned with malicious amusement. What about our human friend? Surely Little Pink wants to try lifting the mighty Titan Crusher. The other recruits turned to look at Jake, and he could see the anticipation in their eyes. They expected him to fail spectacularly, providing entertainment to end their visit to the armory. Some of them were already pulling out recording devices to capture what they assumed would be a humiliating moment. Commander Vexstar looked at Jake with an expression that clearly said he thought this was a waste of time. Very well. Human Morrison, you may attempt to lift the weapon if you wish, but do not strain yourself unnecessarily. Jake approached the Titan Crusher while the aliens gathered around him. He could hear whispered comments and quiet laughter as they prepared to watch him embarrass himself once again. This was just another opportunity to prove that humans did not belong among the Coalition's warriors, but as Jake reached toward the weapon's handle, that strange feeling grew stronger. The Titan Crusher seemed to be waiting for him, almost eager for his touch. Jake wrapped his fingers around the handle and felt a jolt of energy run through his body. Something was about to change, though he had no idea what. Jake's hands closed around the handle of the Titan Crusher, and immediately he knew something was different. The weapon felt warm against his skin, and he could sense a vibration running through the metal that seemed to match his own heartbeat. The quantum core began to glow brighter, pulsing with energy that made the air around the weapon shimmer like heat waves. The alien stopped laughing. Thokmar's grin faded as he watched strange patterns of light dance across the hammer's surface. Commander Vextar stepped closer, his small eyes fixed on the weapon with an expression Jake had never seen before. Even the technicians who maintained the armory moved forward to get a better view. Jake lifted the Titan Crusher off its mounting system. The weapon came up smoothly, as if it weighed no more than a regular hammer from his construction days back. On Earth, the 300 kilograms that had defeated every alien recruit felt perfectly balanced in his hands. The quantum core responded to his touch by sending waves of energy up and down the handle. "Impossible," whispered one of the technicians in heavily accented English. "The bio readings are off the scale. The weapon is drawing more power than it has in centuries." Commander Vextar moved even closer, studying Jake's face for any sign of strain. "Human, how does the weapon feel to you?" Jake considered the question carefully. The Titan Crusher felt natural in his hands, like it belonged there. The energy flowing through the weapon was not fighting against him but working with him, amplifying his movements and responding to his intentions. "It feels right," he said simply. Thokmar shook his head in disbelief. "This cannot be happening. The human is the weakest among us. How can he lift what I could not?" Jake was not just lifting the weapon. As he held the Titan Crusher, his body seemed to remember movements he had never learned. His hands shifted their grip on the handle, and he began to move the massive hammer through the air in flowing patterns that looked like a deadly dance. The quantum core blazed with power as Jake spun the weapon around his body. Energy crackling along the hammer's head created small lightning bolts that snapped and popped in the air. The neutronium metal sang with a deep musical tone that seemed to resonate in the bones of everyone watching. Jake brought the hammer down in a controlled strike toward the reinforced floor of the armory. The weapon's head stopped just short of making contact, but the energy discharge was enough to crack the metal flooring in a perfect circle around the impact point. The sound of the near miss echoed through the room like thunder. "By the ancient makers," breathed Commander Vextar, "I have never seen the weapon respond like this." Even General Morthek required months of training to achieve such control. Jake continued his demonstration, moving the Titan Crusher through attack patterns that seemed to flow naturally from his human instincts. He executed spinning strikes that created whirlwinds of energy, performed precision movements that drew glowing lines in the air, and channeled the weapon's power in ways that made the quantum core pulse like a second heart. The aliens watched in stunned silence as Jake handled the legendary weapon with a grace that none of them could match. Some of the younger recruits had their mouths hanging open, while others were recording everything with their devices. The technicians were frantically taking readings and muttering to each other in their native languages. Jake performed one final movement, bringing the Titan Crusher up in a sweeping arc that sent streamers of energy spiraling toward the ceiling. The weapon seemed to sing with joy as it moved, its quantum core blazing so brightly that everyone in the room had to squint. When Jake finally stopped and lowered the hammer, the silence that followed was complete. Commander Vextar was the first to speak. In 500 years, no one has wielded the Titan Crusher with such natural ability. The weapon chooses its master, and it has clearly chosen you. The massive Krillion's voice was filled with wonder and something that might have been respect. Thokmar stepped forward, his earlier arrogance replaced by confusion. "How is this possible? Humans are weak. They have no military tradition. They cannot even handle our basic training weapons properly." One of the technicians looked up from his readings. "Commander, the biocompatibility sensors are showing something unprecedented. The human's neural patterns are interfacing with the quantum core in ways we have never recorded. It is as if his brain was designed to work with this type of technology." Jake set the Titan Crusher back on its mounting system, and immediately the weapon's glow began to fade. The energy that had filled the room dissipated, leaving behind only the memory of what everyone had witnessed. But the quantum core continued to pulse softly as if waiting for Jake to pick it up again. "This changes everything," Commander Vexstar said quietly. "If humans possess natural compatibility with ancient weapon technology, the implications for coalition defense are enormous." He turned to Jake with an expression that was completely different from the contempt he had shown before. "Human Morrison, you will report to my office immediately after we return to the training facility. We have much to discuss." As the group prepared to leave the armory, Jake noticed that the other recruits were looking at him differently. The mockery and dismissal were gone, replaced by something between awe and fear. Thokmar kept staring at the Titan Crusher as if he could not believe what he had seen. "Little Pink is not so little," one of the Vectari recruits whispered to another, and Jake realized that his nickname had taken on a completely different meaning. The walk back to the training facility was unlike any journey Jake had taken since. Arriving at Nexus Prime, instead of being ignored or ridiculed, he found himself at the center of attention. Alien recruits asked him questions about how the weapon had felt and whether he had experienced anything unusual. Some wanted to know if all humans could do what he had done. Jake tried to answer their questions honestly. But the truth was that he did not understand what had happened any better than they did. The Titan Crusher had felt natural in his hands, but he could not explain why. The movements he had performed seemed to come from somewhere deep in his memory, but he had never learned such techniques. Word of Jake's demonstration spread quickly through the station. By the time they reached the training facility, crowds of aliens had gathered in the corridors to catch a glimpse of the human who had mastered the legendary weapon. Some pointed and whispered as he passed, while others simply stared in amazement. "Commander." Vexstar dismissed the other recruits and led Jake to his private office. The room was sparse and military in appearance, with weapons and commendations covering the walls. The commander gestured for Jake to sit in a chair that was too large for him, then took his place behind a massive desk. "Human Morrison," the commander began, "I owe you an apology. I judged you based on my preconceptions about your species, and I was wrong. What you demonstrated today should not have been possible, yet I witnessed it with my own eyes." Jake shifted uncomfortably in the oversized chair. "Sir, I do not understand what happened either. The weapon just felt right somehow." "That is exactly what concerns me," Vexstar replied. "Ancient Krillian weapons were designed by masters who understood quantum mechanics in ways we have forgotten. If humans possess some natural ability to interface with that technology, it suggests that your species may be far more advanced than we realized." The commander stood up and walked to a window that looked out over the station's main hangar. "I will be filing a report with Coalition Command about today's events. I suspect they will want to conduct extensive tests to understand this phenomenon. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny?" Jake nodded, though he felt nervous about what such tests might involve. "Sir, does this mean that humans might actually have something valuable to contribute to the Coalition?" Commander Vexstar turned back to face him, and for the first time since Jake had arrived, the massive alien smiled. "Human Morrison, I believe your species may have contributions that none of us ever imagined. The question now is whether the rest of the galaxy is ready to accept that possibility." News of Jake's demonstration with the Titan Crusher spread through Nexus Prime faster than anyone could have expected. By the next morning, aliens from every section of the station were talking about the human who had lifted the legendary weapon. Some believed the stories, while others insisted it had to be some kind of trick or mistake. Jake walked into the training facility to find that everything had changed. The other recruits stood when he entered, something that had never happened before. Thokmar approached him with an expression that was completely different from his usual arrogance. "Human Jake," the young Krillian said, using Jake's name for the first time. "I owe you an apology for my behavior. I called you Little Pink and treated you like you were worthless. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." The other recruits nodded in agreement, and several of them stepped forward to offer their own apologies. Jake was so surprised that he did not know what to say. These were the same aliens who had mocked him and ignored him for weeks, and now they were treating him with respect. Commander Vexstar entered the training hall and called for attention. Recruits, we have received new orders from Coalition Command. Human Morrison is to be transferred to Special Weapons Division for immediate testing and evaluation. The rest of you will continue standard training under Instructor Colthon. Jake felt nervous about being separated from the group, but he was also curious about what the testing would involve. Commander Vexstar led him through parts of the station he had never seen before, past laboratories and research facilities that hummed. With advanced technology, they entered a large chamber where several alien scientists were waiting. Jake recognized Dr. Nimvara, a Zephyrian scientist with a huge brain and 6 arms who was famous throughout the Coalition for her research into quantum mechanics. Standing beside her were technicians from multiple species, all carrying devices that Jake assumed were for taking measurements. "Ah, the human who has caused such excitement," Dr. Nimvara said in a voice that sounded like music. "I have studied the recordings of your demonstration with the Titan Crusher, most fascinating. We must understand how this is possible." The testing began immediately. Jake was asked to handle various weapons and tools while the scientists monitored his brain activity and bioelectric field. Some of the weapons responded to his touch just like the Titan Crusher had, glowing with energy and becoming easier to control. Others showed no reaction at all. "Remarkable," Dr. Nimvara murmured as she studied the readings. "Your neural patterns are interfacing with quantum-based systems in ways that should not be possible for any biological creature. Yet the evidence is undeniable." One of the technicians brought out a device that looked like a crystal sphere covered in metal wires. "This is a quantum field manipulator," Dr. Nimvara explained. "It was created by an extinct race called the Builders over 10,000 years ago. No one has been able to activate it for centuries." Jake took the device in his hands and immediately felt the familiar warmth and vibration. The crystal began to glow, and the metal wires hummed with energy. Suddenly, the air around Jake shimmered, and he found that he could move objects without touching them just by thinking about it. "Impossible," whispered one of the technicians. "The power requirements alone should be beyond any individual's capacity." Dr. Nimvara was taking readings so fast that her 6 arms were moving in a blur. "The human's brain is acting as a biological quantum processor. His neural networks have evolved in a way that allows direct interface with quantum fields. This is unprecedented in galactic history." The testing continued for hours, with Jake trying different ancient weapons and devices. Each success brought new amazement from the scientists, who could not explain what they were witnessing. Finally, Dr. Nimvara called for a break and asked to speak with Jake privately. "Human Jake," she said, "what I am about to tell you must remain confidential for now. Your species possesses something that we have been searching for throughout the galaxy. The ability to naturally interface with quantum technology is the key to understanding weapons and tools left behind by ancient civilizations." Jake listened carefully as the scientist explained that there were ruins and artifacts scattered across hundreds of worlds, all created by races that had disappeared long ago. The Coalition had been trying to understand this technology for generations, but had made little progress because they could not activate most of the devices. "If humans can do what you have demonstrated today, it changes everything," Dr. Nimvara continued. "Your species could help us unlock secrets that have been hidden for millennia. But this also means that other powers in the galaxy will want to control or eliminate humans once they learn of your abilities." Over the following days, more tests were conducted with different humans. Lisa Grant and Dr. Pete Collins were brought in to try the various devices, and both showed similar abilities to Jake, though not quite as strong. Messages were sent to Earth requesting more volunteers for testing. The results were always the same. Every human who tried the quantum devices could activate them to some degree. Some were better than others, but all possessed the basic ability that no other species had demonstrated. Dr. Nimvara's theory was that human evolution, with its emphasis on tool use and adaptation, had created brain structures that were naturally compatible with quantum fields. Meanwhile, Jake's status on the station continued to change. Commander Vexstar formally apologized for his earlier treatment and requested that Jake serve as his personal aide. The massive Krillian admitted that he had learned more about combat from watching Jake use the Titan Crusher than from years of traditional training. The other recruits began asking Jake to help them with their own training. His natural understanding of quantum weapons allowed him to teach techniques that their regular instructors had never considered. Even aliens who had been warriors for decades found that Jake could show them new ways to improve their skills. Admiral Zorthik, the commander of Nexus Prime, called Jake to his office for a private meeting. The Admiral was an ancient Krillian who had fought in more battles than anyone could remember, and his respect meant something throughout the Coalition. "Human Morrison," the Admiral said, "your achievements have reached the highest levels of Coalition command. There are discussions about establishing new training programs specifically designed around human abilities. Your species may become the key to defending our galaxy against threats we have not yet imagined." Jake felt overwhelmed by the responsibility that was being placed on him. Just weeks earlier, he had been the joke of the training program, and now he was being treated like some kind of savior. But he also felt proud that humans were finally being recognized for their potential contributions. The Admiral continued, "I am authorizing the formation of a special unit that will combine human quantum weapon specialists with traditional alien warriors. You will lead this unit with full authority to recruit and train personnel as you see fit." Word of the new unit spread quickly through the station, and Jake found himself with more volunteers than he could handle. Aliens who had once mocked humans now competed for the chance to serve alongside them. Even Thokmar requested assignment to the new unit, eager to learn from the human he had once called Little Pink. Jake's first mission as unit commander came sooner than expected. Pirates had been attacking Coalition supply convoys using weapons that standard forces could not counter. Intelligence reports suggested the pirates had found ancient technology that made their ships nearly invincible. Jake led his mixed-species team into their first real combat, carrying the Titan Crusher on his back and wearing armor designed specifically for human physiology. His team included Thokmar and several other former recruits, all eager to prove themselves alongside their human leader. The battle was fierce, but Jake's ability to use quantum weapons turned the tide. He disabled the pirate ship's ancient shields and cleared the way for his team to board and capture the enemy vessels. The mission was a complete success, and news of the victory spread throughout Coalition space. As Jake sat in his quarters after the mission, writing a report to Earth, he reflected on how much had changed. The aliens who had laughed at him now followed him into battle, and humans were being welcomed into Coalition forces as valuable allies rather than amusing curiosities. He finished his message to Earth with words that captured everything he had learned. They laughed at what they did not understand, but respect must be earned through action, not assumptions. Humans have something unique to offer the galaxy, and now the galaxy is finally ready to listen. Outside his window, Jake could see Earth's blue glow in the distance, and he knew that soon many more humans would join him among the stars. The age of human participation in galactic affairs was just beginning, and Jake Morrison had helped make it possible.